Hello, everyone. Dave Rulis from Ravenflow here. My sincere apologies for the delay in getting started today. There was a GoToMeeting software issue that I was wrestling with between Internet Explorer and Google Chrome and any browser that I had access to. So my apologies. I finally worked my way through that, and hopefully you all can hear me, and we'll just go ahead and get started here right away. Again, my apologies. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is basically get right into the webinar. If I've neglected to introduce myself, my name is David Rulis. I'm Vice President of Products here at Ravenflow, and so I'll be a host and demo guide for today's webinar. The focus of today, of course, is visualizing business processes with Raven Cloud, and today you'll learn how we believe that Raven Cloud is transforming the business process marketplace by automatically generating process diagrams from natural language descriptions of those processes. And of course, the focus will be on giving you a live demonstration of Raven Cloud, walking you through all the key capabilities, and even give you a sneak preview of some of the features that will be available when Raven Cloud goes live as a subscription service beginning right after Thanksgiving. A few housekeeping items beyond getting the webinar to start in the first place. Go ahead and submit questions directly through the GoToWebinar interface that you see, because we should have time to answer them today as we go through the presentation. If you don't have any questions that you can think of right now, feel free to go out to the Raven Cloud blog at blog.ravencloud.com and put some feedback in there, and I'll be happy to respond. The webinar is being recorded, and so there'll be a link that will be shared after the event. And then if you would like a copy of today's presentation, feel free to send me an email, david.rulis@ravenflow.com. You'll see that at the end of the presentation as well, and I'll be happy to send along a copy of the presentation. Okay, so let's get started. Let me just see if everybody is online here. Okay. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get started. The agenda today is going to be very fast and furious. So we'll go through some of the challenges that we see customers experiencing in terms of getting a handle on their business processes, the challenges associated with that. We'll provide or introduce Raven Cloud as a potential solution to some of those challenges. We'll give you a demo, as I described earlier, give you a hint at where the product line is going, Raven Cloud is going in terms of new capabilities that we envision to roll out in the coming months. And then again, we'll go ahead and respond to any questions that you might have as we go through this. So beginning with, why? Why model your business processes? Why does anybody care about this? Number one, we see business process modeling as a key means of really providing a visual basis for developing a shared understanding between business stakeholders on one side and IT stakeholders on the other. And that could be people within the company, it could be business partners outside the company, it could be relationships with your customers. If you can visualize a business process that really clearly conveys how something works in your company or how you want to make it work going forward, then it provides a basis for developing a shared understanding between all the stakeholders involved. In terms of project management, we see business processes as a great way of understanding what the functional scope of a project really is, what are the key capabilities to deliver and to who. And if you clarify that clearly through the process, then you can manage expectations in terms of where the project is going, what the schedule is, and what those capabilities will be in terms of delivery at the end of the project. It allows more people to be involved overall because visualization helps people relate to a project. It helps them participate more proactively to get involved in the elicitation of requirements, for example, to transform a process the way it is now to the way you want it to be going forward. It helps identify any issues or errors that you might have in the process, the way a business is running now, It helps identify the decision points that are key in terms of driving work one direction or another. It ultimately helps identify any capabilities that a particular user or participant in the process might need that hasn't been identified, that isn't being delivered, and it helps you identify those things visually, which provides a context overall. And finally, point number 5, it talks about how a business process perhaps within your company relates to touch points with other systems, whether they're inside the firewall or out, or between other organizations, for example, partner organizations or customers outside the company. So there's a number of reasons why you would model business processes for process improvement purposes, for application development purposes. These are just a few of them. Slide 4 really describes visually how people have approached process modeling historically. Tribal knowledge, that's shown in the upper left-hand corner, is one way that people convey what it is or how their business works. And the issue there, of course, is it's not transportable. It oftentimes leaves stakeholders out of the loop. And certainly it's not something that's easily conveyed to others to the extent that you need to take a process as it is now to perhaps some other form in the future. The famous whiteboard or sticky note approach to defining the steps in a business process or the steps in a work procedure. I once participated in a project over 20 years ago to outline all the steps in terms of building a power plant, and was part of a project team that did that, and it was a huge conference room filled with nothing but 3M Post-it notes all over the walls, and so every single activity performed by the stakeholders involved in building a power plant was something that was kind of where I cut my teeth in business process many years ago. And of course, the whiteboard approach is somebody brave enough to go up to that whiteboard and put the first box and put the first arrow between boxes on that whiteboard is something that we've all experienced, whether it's outlining a system configuration or outlining a business process and the logic for getting work done in your company. And finally, the 3 graphics at the bottom of this slide talk about or show how many people involved in business process modeling have used historically the big 3 in terms of Microsoft Office products to do that work. Number 1 is Microsoft Word, where perhaps instead of drawing the process, they describe it as a narrative or as part of a specification document that describes that business process. Next up is PowerPoint, and you would be surprised the number of users that I encounter every day that continue to rely on PowerPoint graphics for outlining or drawing a flow chart or a process diagram because that's the tool they're most comfortable using. And finally, Microsoft Visio, which is certainly the preeminent drawing tool, business diagramming tool in the marketplace. And of course, many business analysts and process analysts use Visio for documenting their business process as well. The challenge, of course, for some of those people is they're not very good at it, or they struggle to use Visio in the way it was intended to do process modeling. This slide, number 5, really gives it, provides additional context in terms of, if you think about your job as a business analyst, let's say that you're attending this webinar as a BA or a process analyst or something in between, your job is to do business analysis as part of a project team, and process modeling might be one of the things that you want to do. But if you look at the numbers, notice how Microsoft Office tools are used preeminently in many situations. Over 90% of people are using Visio or attempting to use it. But notice the call out there that, according to the likes of Gartner and Forrester, some leading industry analysts who I've talked to personally, I asked them the question, so if that many people are using Visio, what percentage of them really are successful at doing that? How effective are they using Visio to draw process models, for example? And the numbers are surprisingly small as a percentage of the total, right? So we want to make sure that we recognize that while process modeling is something that's quite important, the tools and methods that you use to get those models created is a challenge for a lot of folks. And one of the things that we want to do at Ravenflow is provide perhaps a different way of doing that. So let me see, I thought I had some questions here. Let me just see. No, I don't think so. Okay, so anyway, I thought there may be some questions, but I'll just keep going, and hopefully everybody's staying on board here. Okay, so so that's that slide. One of the things I want to do now is as you ask a poll question in terms of what tools do you all use in terms of getting process diagrams done. So let me do that right now and start a poll. Let me launch that poll right now. And the question is, right, what tools do you use most often to draw or model business process, right? And so if you just take a few seconds and respond to the different options that are available to you, I'll wait until at least 75% of you have voted, and we'll go from there, right? Do I use Visio? I use a third-party process modeling tool, perhaps provided by a BPM vendor. I use PowerPoint, or I use SmartDraw or some other business diagramming tool. Okay, so let's go ahead and close the poll and share the results with you. And guess what? You know, those 90% figures are reinforced yet again. Right, 90% of you are using Visio for process modeling. Small percentage are using PowerPoint, but I've seen that number as high as 25% in some of the webinars that I've done over the last several months. A small percentage are using other tools, right? And you know, and every time I do this webinar, I find 5, 10, even 15% of the attendees actually don't use any tool because they don't use modeling, or they don't model business processes. So. So anyway, thanks for responding to that. And in terms of the key process challenges, you know, the point here really is that, you know, process modeling as a discipline continues to evolve. The companies continue to struggle getting the most out of their business processes and the tools they use to visualize and to analyze and to diagram those processes. Some of those challenges include agreeing on a format and having a diagram produced that all stakeholders can understand and agree on. They struggle to master, whether it's Visio or a third-party BPM tool. They struggle with the drawing part. They're not visual thinkers, perhaps. They struggle with laying out information in a visual form, whatever. But mastering process modeling tools is a challenge for many of us. Ensuring, however, the model is created, that it's logically and functionally complete. Right? The decision points in the flow have true and false paths. Right? That the logic or the decision being made is correct. There are no missing steps, so there are no flow breaks between one step and another. So all that's really important, because if those things are incorrect, they can become a source of flawed requirements downstream, right, when development is proceeding against that model you created in the first place. Validation of process, you know, with stakeholders, both on the business and IT side, is certainly important, and so people do struggle with that. And then, you know, in addition to, you know, creating a diagram format that everybody can kind of embrace, storing that away, sharing it with others, reusing it in future projects is a challenge as well, in terms of putting these things in a position to be leveraged as a resource, as an artifact that can be leveraged in this project as well as future ones, is obviously important. And we want to make sure that we support that type of thing. Okay, and specifically, you know, we can argue about what the specific challenges really are, but drawing process models from scratch can be a very tedious exercise for some of us, right? learning curve for some of these tools, again, is perhaps more than people want to deal with, right? Many business users can't think visually and struggle with laying things out across the drawing surface, whether that's an electronic drawing surface or a whiteboard, right? The same challenge is there. Ensuring that the steps in the flow are labeled and identified in a consistent format with consistent terminology so that you don't refer to something over here differently than you refer to it over there at the other end of the diagram, for example. And then ultimately, some of modeling is error prone. If you don't have tools that help you self-correct, that identify errors in the model early in the cycle, then again, that can lead to issues downstream, which can be a drag on your project, could be a drag in terms of project schedule, feature functions that aren't delivered to specifications, or the schedule and budget are blown because of misunderstandings that occurred very early in the project life cycle. Okay, so we're going to return to a quick survey and go on to the second question, which is, what are your most significant process modeling challenges? And this is a multiple choice question. It just takes too long is one response that's valid. Visio and other drawing tools are just too hard to use for folks. So go ahead and look at these responses, and please vote and put some numbers in here. Laying the things out so everything looks good and is logically correct is a challenge. Labeling, ensuring the logic and flow are correct. So have a look. I'll wait again for another few seconds until 75% of you have weighed in. That would be terrific. I'd appreciate your responding to this. Okay, a couple more clicks should do it. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, share the results, and there you see 16% of you are saying, just takes too long. 58% struggle with just laying out things so the diagram is logically organized, the spacing looks good, labeling is inconsistently is a problem, and over 50% of you really struggle with making sure that the logic is correct, right? That you're not laying things out where the flow between two activities is inconsistent with kind of what needs to be or what the actual situation in your company. Okay, so thanks for responding to that. And let me close the poll if I can just find my mouse pointer here. Hold on. Okay, so here we go. Let me hide that and get back to the presentation. Oh, okay. One final poll question here while I'm in this vicinity. How long? How long does it take you guys to, on average now, don't just be honest, how long does it take you on average to generate a typical business process diagram reflecting the way your company works now or the way it's going to work going forward? You see, does it take, you're fast, it takes 1 to 2 hours, it takes 3 to 4, 4 to 8, more than a day, more than 2 days, right? And all these responses are valid. Obviously, the complexity of the process bears on this, but just in general terms, what does it take? How much time is spent? Okay. So let me close the poll and share the results here. 5% of you are very good. You could knock out processes like in your sleep. About 20% of you are in the 3 to 4 hour range, 33% in the 4 to 8, 29% in the 1 to 2 day range, and 14% in more than 2. So again, these are all valid responses, and we see this kind of thing go on a lot. And it's one of the challenges that when Raven and Raven Cloud are trying to fulfill is to reduce that time it takes to get a very nice error-free process diagram created, so you can apply that or utilize that diagram for whatever your project is focused on, whether it's documenting your work procedures or as part of a process improvement project, or whether it's because you're developing a new software application and you're using the business process to set the visual context for the scope of that project. Okay, so let's go on and then introduce Raven Cloud really quickly and get into the demo. We introduced it last May. It's been very well received. Over 500 users a week are coming in and giving it a try. It's been in open beta since that time, and the news for today is we intend to have it go live as a subscription service beginning right after Thanksgiving. So we delayed that a little bit based on some feedback, some things that people wanted to see, capabilities we wanted to enable. The bottom line is this thing is going to go live, so you can become both either a free account holder or a paid subscriber with additional capabilities beginning right after Thanksgiving. So so without further ado, I'm just going to get into the Raven Cloud demo. This gives you a visual depiction of what it really is all about, and the ability to go from a textual description of a business process or a work procedure or a use case, activity flow, and take those words and turn them into a diagram like what you see here. And so Raven Cloud fundamentally introduces a new approach, a new paradigm for modeling business processes that helps overcome some of those issues that we reviewed earlier in terms of the surveys. The challenge of visualization, the challenge of diagram layout and logical review, and those types of things. So that's what we're all about here at Ravenflow. Okay, so let me switch over to Raven Cloud demo. And what you do when you go to ravencloud.com, which you can do at your leisure here over the next several weeks, all for free, is you go to ravencloud.com and you try it now, right? And what it's going to do is launch a rich interactive application based on a technology called Microsoft Silverlight. Think of it as the conceptual equivalent of the Adobe Flash technology. The idea is that you can create a very rich, immersive application experience in a browser that rivals what you could produce as a desktop application. And in some cases, maybe even better, right? Of course, we'll leave that opinion up to you, right? So this is the interface that you see upon launching Raven Cloud, and it includes a Process Explorer control here on the left that you can collapse and expand as you need to. It comes for free account holders, it comes with a set of process examples or templates, if you will, that are just selections of processes across a number of industries, just to help you get started, to give you some working examples of business processes that you could follow, understand how they're written, and then apply what you learn to your own processes, right? And the way this works is either you go in here and select something, customer search process, and get that copied in, or you could also use a search mechanism like here, and start typing in and have it identify perhaps some examples, and it'll filter the list here, and you can copy that in. Bottom line is, when you're all ready, you could tuck this away, go into this process, click the button here that's strategically placed between the text here that you see on the left, right, and the diagram that will appear on the right when you click this button, which I'll do now. Right? And so what Raven Cloud does fundamentally is give you this ability to take that text and generate this diagram with a click of the button. Right? So you don't have to draw that process model. We do the drawing for you. And we do it from this natural language description of this particular process, which is about product ordering, right? And Raven Cloud includes a set of features for panning and zooming into the diagram. You can even do things like rotate the diagram from a horizontal to a vertical orientation with a click of the button and back again. You can make the diagram fit to the window here. You can go down to the lower right-hand corner and click on the little monitor icon and look at the diagram full screen on your display. So you can take it all in at once, and click the escape button to go back. So those are just some of the things that you see in the interface of Raven Cloud. And again, you can use these zoom functions to zoom in, etc. And the other thing that you'll notice here, if I click this button, which highlights, based on how I describe this process, the actors who participate, the functions they perform, and the objects that they handle as part of that process. And so if I click this button, notice how it will colorize the text and indicate in blue are the actors, green are the functions, and red are the objects, if you will. And so you can really see the power of the Raven language engine in terms of what it analyzed from the text that you entered and how it derived the diagram from that same text. If I click on a particular sentence here in the narrative, notice how it will highlight the corresponding steps in the diagram. So if I go into the sales department, it's talking about the sales department actor, which is right here, sending a purchase order right from that department to finance, where it's being received. They do a credit check, and they do a decision about whether that credit check is approved. All these steps, right, are being generated automatically from how you describe the process over here on the left-hand side, right? So what we try to do is give you a very strong kind of visual correlation between the descriptive text for the process and the diagram that's generated from that. And that's how you edit these diagrams. You basically go in and change this narrative in order to change the content of the diagram. Now, the other way you can look at this is if you click one of these buttons, like show the process terms, what we'll do is show you a list of the terms that Raven identified automatically from the text that you enter. It's identified this actor called a customer, or this actor called a warehouse, right? Or this object called a credit check, right? And so these are things that Raven can determine automatically from how you describe the process, and I'll show you further examples of that as we go. The other button here shows you the functions performed by the various participants in the process, or as they're also called, the actors, right? The actors who participate in this particular process. So I've got a sales department reviewing the purchase order, or the finance department performing a credit check, right? So these are all things that Raven can identify automatically, which helps you not only define a clear process, but a consistent one, right, that is using consistent terminology. And as I'll show you here in a second, it will also identify any errors that you've entered into the narrative and help you correct them very early so they don't lead to flawed requirements downstream. Okay, so if I were to just start over here, and let me just show you how this works from scratch, right? So if I were to enter a process from scratch, so if I say start process, right? And we're going to say for an expense reimbursement scenario, the employee prepares the expense report, period, end process. And you can use the phrase start process and end process to introduce start and end nodes, right, into your diagram. So if I were to quickly analyze and visualize this little narrative snippet, you'll see you'll get a very simple diagram as shown here. One actor doing one activity step and a start and an end node. And so that's how that works. And you can extend this and say, well, okay, so the employee sends the expense report to the manager, right? And now what you'll see is the introduction of a second actor in the process called the manager, who's actually receiving the expense report, right? And then if you go on, you say, well, then you could say the manager reviews the expense report, right? And so now you see that manager doing something called review. Now, this is a natural language engine, so there's other ways that you could express what I've just written here, right? I could take this out to, the employee prepares the expense report, right, and sends it to the manager, who then reviews it, right? So a fairly natural way of describing what happens in those first stages of this particular process. So instead of writing it in 3 sentences, I could have written it in 1. And this is just an example of how Raven is really identifying the semantics of what you're describing in the narrative, the syntax, the English language syntax that it can analyze in this kind of way to get, a business process diagram created from a very naturally expressed description of that process. Okay, so if I continue that little process here and say, well, you know what, now what does the manager do? If the manager approves the expense report, then he forwards it to accounting, right? And I continue. Now here, what I've done is, if I make this fit, notice that I've got an error now condition that's been highlighted here in the toolbar because at this point of decision here where the expense report approval is done, there's only a yes path, but there's no, no path or a false path. So if I expose that error here as a list, it'll actually show me that there's an incomplete conditional, one of 10 different errors that Raven can identify for you at that point in the process. Again, only a true path, no false path, right? So how do I correct that? Well, I go back into the narrative, right? And I say, well, if the manager approves the special, then he forwards it to accounting, right? Otherwise, the manager returns the expense report to the employee. All right, so now I can reanalyze that. That error condition will clear, and now you see that I have both a true path and a false path coming out of this particular decision step in the diagram. And so that's how this works, right? And the other thing that you can do, right, is if I could actually put markers in this thing and put go-to labels, right? So if I label this first sentence prepare, and then and then I say here go to prepare, and I grab this thing and put it over here instead, and I reanalyze this thing, you'll notice that you can now introduce looping constructs into the diagram by just labeling your sentences in a manner that drives the flow back to a particular point in the process. So what I'm trying to do is just show you really quickly some of the power of Raven to take in a natural language description of the process and create the type of diagram that you see here, right? And so that's how that works. Now, a couple other things I'll just quickly show you to make sure we don't run out of time. And again, that we can go here, we can come back and go into some other process, just for an example, this particular customer support process, just to show you some of the other features that are available in the open beta period that will later be part of the subscription service. For example, we show and highlight in other webinars our integration with Visio. And what you can do, right, is click on the Export to Visio button and export to either Visio 2010 or Visio 2007. Of course, if you're a subscriber, you won't have to enter your name and email address here, but for the purposes of our webinar today, I'll go ahead and do that. And by the way, this is my email address if you want to request a copy of the presentation later. And so what I can do, right, is I can download this this particular diagram to my desktop as Visio, right? And so if I were to have, I don't think I loaded Visio on my desktop, so let me just do that real quick. And close my Global 360 plugin, go out to my desktop, which happens to show the San Francisco Giants won the World Series for some reason. And what I'll do is I'll open up the diagram that started in the cloud, in Raven Cloud. I exported it to a Visio format. Now you see that I can now open up that very diagram as an intelligent, Visio set of objects in Microsoft Visio 2010. Right? And in this case, it behaves like you would expect it to behave. You can do things like obviously move things around, resize the swim lanes, or even do things like reorganize the swim lanes, as you want to. Right? Because it's now a native Visio diagram, it'll behave just like that. And you can do things like go to the cross-functional flow chart and hide the title area or show it, etc. Right? Hide the separator bar or not. Change the styling of the diagram, right, into something that's not as beautiful as what we've generated automatically. But the point is that you can do this using this capability. And so maybe you're not a Visio expert, but you can produce a very clear, compelling, high-fidelity Visio drawing and hand it off to somebody who is a Visio user, right? Or store it away in a repository of other Visio diagrams, for example. So that's the usage scenario for that particular feature in Raven Cloud. And so I won't spend too much time on that, but I wanted to at least highlight that capability. And the other thing that is available that I won't demonstrate today, there's a set of XML-based output capabilities that is part of this, that will be part of the paid subscription service. And there's a set of standards that we've developed against XMI and XPDL. What these are process modeling interchange standards. So if you want to take what you create in Raven Cloud and hand it off a model to IBM Rational Rhapsody program, for example, you could use this XMI output option to do that. Or if you were a BPM customer of Global 360 or Metastorm or some of the leading vendors in that space, you could use one of the XPDL options, generate a diagram in the cloud, export it into XPDL format, and then import it as a process model in those vendors' products. Right? And finally, if you guys are familiar with HP Quality Center, specifically HP Quality Center version 11, which has a new process modeling capability as part of it, you could actually use this XPDL capability, generate a process diagram in the cloud, and then import it into HP Quality Center 11 and make it the basis for doing requirements and doing test case generation all within HP Quality Center. So again, what we're trying to do with Raven Cloud is provide a great ability to generate these diagrams that some of you might struggle to create, and then provide a set of capabilities to take those diagrams away, either as an image, right, of the diagram that you can do here, or you could take it away as a Visio diagram or an XPDL format or whatever, and do that very quickly and not have to draw that model from scratch. So that's a quick look at Raven Cloud. Certainly feel free to go in, use Raven Cloud, tell others to do the same over the next few weeks, the last part of November here. And then beginning next month, you will have a subscription service that you can sign up for, or have a limited functionality free account that allows you to kind of work with Raven Cloud until you're comfortable, perhaps, of stepping up to a subscriber level. So, okay, that's my demo for today. Let me go back to the PowerPoint presentation. And you'll notice in the software there's a little help button in the upper right. And if you click on that button, you'll get a little writing guide that has some assistance for you in terms of learning how to express the process or describe the process using this form of an actor, performs a function, handles an object, and delivers it to another actor as a target. So that, look for that in the interface. And we'll also be providing, in addition to the process example folder that you saw, a set of templates across a number of industries. There'll also be a Raven tutorials folder that will appear. It just has little snippets of processes in terms of using the Raven, how to do nested conditional statements, for example. Just a little narratives that help you master the authoring of these processes so you can generate great-looking diagrams in a fraction of the time. Okay, so in terms of the value of Raven Cloud, a couple of luminaries in the business process market, Nathaniel Palmer and Sandy Kelmsley, have weighed in on this, and they've been very complimentary about Raven Cloud. And really the bottom line is it really helps people participate in projects, deliver or contribute process diagrams as part of the project in a manner that perhaps they couldn't before, right? So if a BA understands the process but couldn't draw it very well, then maybe Raven Cloud is an avenue for them. Or if there are other non-technical folks that want to be able to contribute but currently can't in the most effective way, these types of comments are the ones that we've seen about Raven Cloud, about Raven as a technology in general, this unique text-to-diagram capability that I just demonstrated. And this same capability is going to, we have in our current product line, but also in Raven for Office, a new generation Office plugin that we're going to introduce early next year, and so forth. There'll be a number of new product announcements from the company in the coming weeks. Okay, some final things before we sign off for today. Roadmap. There's a set of new capabilities that we've been working on. One of them is the ability to generate process diagrams that are consistent with BPMN as a standard. If you're not familiar with that, it stands for Business Process Modeling Notation, and is considered to be the emerging standard for process symbology and laying out a process like you see here. Now, to be fair, not all customers and not all business analysts care about BPMN. They care mostly about producing a diagram that stakeholders can understand. But for those that do, we're working on this capability for those that want to support that standard. For those that don't, or for those that want to have BPMN, but they want to have even something better perhaps, we're working on extensions of our diagram capability so you could produce a diagram like you see here, where you could associate icons to the different actors or the different objects or the different functions, if you will, and then have those icons appear in the steps in the flow. Why would you do that? Well, you'd be able to produce a diagram that is very high fidelity and much more compelling and easier to understand by the broadest set of stakeholders possible. So we're getting a lot of interest in that type of thing where, yeah, the BPMN standard is great, but I need something to draw in more business owners, to really describe the process in a way they really, really understand and appreciate. So we're working on this. Glossary. All the things that I showed you guys in this demonstration here in the last several minutes was done without the aid of a glossary capability. Raven does not need one to function, but to the extent that you have a glossary of consistent terminology, a shared vocabulary, if you will, then we're working to produce one. Now, our current product that's already in the marketplace and been there for some time, called Raven Professional, has had a glossary. It does have a glossary that you can populate with business-specific terminology. Raven doesn't need it in terms of the language engine, but it certainly benefits from it and can leverage it to create the most consistent definition of a process and the terms within it as possible. So we're working on introducing that across our product line. You should expect to see that as an extension of Raven Cloud early next year. That you can say, well, I'm going to author this process just like I showed you in the demo, but when I do my analysis, I want to reference these terms. And when that happens, you'll be able to populate the glossary with your own terminology, and then when Raven does its job, it'll actually identify those terms that are in the glossary and identify those terms that were not, and give you an opportunity to actually populate the glossary with from the analysis work that it does. So it'll work bidirectionally. Start with a glossary that's already populated, or build it out incrementally from the narratives that you analyze with Raven. Fourth is a requirements collection capability. So many of you might know Ravenflow as being a leader in the requirements market. People use Raven to do process and use case analysis so that they can get to the right requirements as early as possible. Well, what people have been asking us for is the ability to do what I showed you, but also provide the ability to associate a set of requirements against the diagram or against the steps in the diagram. And so that's what we're working on. And you'll have that ability as well early next year. And finally, in spite of the power that you saw in Raven Cloud that I just demonstrated, some customers aren't comfortable, or it's against their company policy to leverage a publicly hosted service like Raven Cloud, even though, right, it's all secure, and it's all private, nobody can see your artifacts, all that kind of stuff. But people say, look, we'd love to have a Raven Cloud capability, but we want to have it behind our firewall, hosted on our infrastructure. So we will be introducing in January a privately hosted version of Raven Cloud we call Raven Cloud Enterprise, which would allow you to take what you saw, install it behind you on your infrastructure, and then populate it with your own templates, authenticate your own users, and not have anything to do with hosting it in the public cloud. So that's totally up to you. Okay, final survey question here then, if you can just indulge me for one more minute. If I launch this survey of the capabilities that I just highlighted, what enhancements would you most like to see? And this is a multiple choice question, so if you please just give me a sign in terms of what would you like to see. I'd like to see those BPMN style diagrams. Forget that, I'd like the high fidelity stuff. I want to see a glossary that I can leverage when I do my modeling with Raven. I want requirements capability so that I can use this cloud capability as a way of getting to the right requirements for my project, et cetera, et cetera. So let me give you a few more seconds. We'll just cross 60%. Okay, so let me close and share the results. 33% said, yep, BPMN, 22% high fidelity, 50% glossary, 94% requirements. What do you guys? All requirements guys. And 33% would like to take that Raven Cloud capability behind the firewall and use it for their own purposes. So thanks very much for that. It's great feedback for us so we can help prioritize what we're doing in terms of go-forward development strategy. Okay, so that's the end of our webinar today. You know, if you can basically go out to Raven Cloud, tell your friends or colleagues to go out and give it a try. We're in the final throes of kind of keeping the service for open beta consumption here. Again, after Thanksgiving, we'll go live. You'll still have a free account capability, but we'll have some of those features I showed not available to you. You register for future webinars going forward, join our mailing list, and go to blog.ravencloud.com if you want to kind of join the conversation and provide feedback on an ongoing basis. So long story short, let me just kind of stop before I close off and say, was there any questions that people have? And I got a nice thank you from Maria, but no other questions. So anyway, feel free to, after the fact, drop me an email, david.ruiz@ravencloud.com. We have people, let me just go to the last slide so you can see my email address. And if you want a copy of the presentation, I'll be happy to forward it along later today. And again, this concludes a webinar on the Visualizing Business Processes with Raven Cloud. And hopefully you've had a chance to see today that we believe Raven Cloud makes mapping out your business processes faster and easier and more accessible to more people than ever before. So whether it's about kind of understanding the way your company works now or modeling processes, you can figure out ways to make them work better. I think Raven Cloud has a little bit of something for a lot of different folks in the enterprise marketplace. So thanks to all of you for taking time to attend today. And again, please tell your friends or colleagues to give Raven Cloud a try. And we'll hopefully talk to you soon on down the road. So goodbye for now, and thanks once again.